If you saw last week's Henderson Today, you already know about Dr. Dunn's Camino trip coming up this year. However, that was just a shortened cut of her interview. Here is the full package, complete with all that Dr. Dunn had to say. Special thanks to Savannah Price for conducting the interview.
Hi, I'm Maryjane Dunn, and I am a professor of Spanish here at Henderson State University, and I've been here for 10 years. I started as a student of journalism, and I was sure I was going to be the greatest photojournalist ever. I was going to work for those big magazines. And then I started thinking, I better have Spanish because there's a lot of world politics going on in South America. I loved Spanish. It was really pretty easy for me, but I continued with journalism for my first 2 years of my college career at the University of Nebraska. And then I realized that there was no way I could have a normal life. I couldn't have a family. I couldn't to do the kind of journalism that I wanted to do. So I started rethinking it, and so I thought, I'm good at Spanish. I'll just continue in Spanish. My mentor, when I was a junior, he said, well, what are you going to do with Spanish? I said, I don't know. And he said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, what I want to do is be a student the rest of my life. And he said, you have two choices. You can either marry somebody with a lot of money, or you can join me on this side of the desk. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, because as a college professor, you will always be studying, and you will always be studying with students, and you will always be learning new things. And that's when I started in on the Camino de Santiago and pilgrimage as my great love of interest and investigation. The pilgrimage, or the Camino de Santiago as it's commonly known, is actually a series of routes. It's really more of an experience. There's a legend that says that St. James the Apostle preached in Spain, and that then he went back to Jerusalem. He was beheaded by Herod, but his own disciples, his own followers, carried his body all the way back around to a town called Santiago de Compostela. People beginning in the 9th and 10th century started walking, because that was the only means of transportation, to make a pilgrimage to worship at his shrine, at his tomb. There's always been this sense of moving westward, traveling westward in Spain, in Europe in general, to get to this end of the earth, to get to Santiago de Compostela, which is just a few miles off the coast of Spain, in Galicia. I first walked the Camino in 1979. My studies as a graduate student were all about pilgrimage, allegorical pilgrimage and literature, the Middle Ages, etc. And so I brought it forward. But then I thought, I want to have other students experience this great opportunity that I had. I want to offer to other students what I had. So beginning in 2016, again in 2018, I took students from Henderson on the Camino. We're going this year, and we're not going on what a lot of students or what a lot of people think of as the big Camino, which has, because of movies like The Way with Martin Sheen, has become kind of the single idea that most Americans have about what the Camino is. We're going to leave from a little town called Chaves, Portugal, and we're going to go to Santiago de Compostela. It's about 170 miles that we're going to be walking. We'll walk that in 12 walking days. We'll take some extra day in a small town, or a town called Ourense, to experience what's there in that town. And then we'll spend some time touring by bus in Galicia, go back to Madrid, and spend a few days there. So my goal with students is that I know that for many of them this may be the only chance that they ever have, or at least in the near future, to get to Europe. And I want to maximize every possible experience that they could have. So we're going to be staying in small pilgrim hostels. We're going to be staying in what are called donativos, a person who has rooms open and you just give a donation for staying there. We're going to be staying in a monastery and attending the monastic Vesper service. We're going to be going to cathedrals. We're going to then go and travel by bus to some other features in Galicia. We're going to visit a mussel, M-U-S-S-E-L, the shellfish, not mussels. The mussel farm that's off the coast in Spain, and then we'll go back to Madrid, where we're going to see the Prado, and which is one of the premier art museums in Europe, and experience a cosmopolitan capital and that nightlife. So mostly I love my students. I love going on the Camino, and I love sharing my experience. I mean, if you look around my room, you'll see that everything I do is kind of in some way part of that whole idea of Camino. This year, in particular, we've attempted to put in an academic theme. So freshman seminar and some other particular classes have focused on the academic theme of pilgrimage as a transformational journey. And so, it's an opportunity for me to take students who don't have to be speaking Spanish. They don't have to be a Spanish major or even a Spanish minor. It's to take students on a transformational journey. When I take the students that are going with me are expected to take a class on the Camino. It's cross-listed as either humanities or Spanish. It's taught in English. The readings are, for the most part, all in English. I ask the Spanish students to study a little bit, to read a few of the Spanish things. But in general, I think that in this age of technology and a much smaller, shrinking world, because we have so much electronic contact with other people, it's really important to pull back and to reassert our own independence and our individuality and our own personal time to go away, to challenge ourselves physically. And really, I see it as a greater mental challenge for most, maybe not most, but for many students. The will that it takes and the grit that it takes to keep walking when you're tired, and to not know and not really understand how far is 15 miles on foot. How long is that going to take me? Or what do I do if I just don't feel well? How do I keep moving ahead? So it's a great insight into yourself. It's a great insight into how much you can both put up with and how much you can control your own feelings and your own destiny. So I was once asked, how did walking the Camino de Santiago change your life? And my answer was, how could it not? The Camino de Santiago changed my life completely. It set me on a new Camino. It set me on a new course. I walked between my undergraduate and my graduate experience. I, since then, have done research, written books, have made friends, have continued to grow and develop and learn. It's informed every decision I've ever made. Even when bad things happen that don't seem to be related to the Camino, it's like, well, look, I can do this for 15 days. I can put up with this person for 8 hours. I can survive this. When I walked in 1979, we walked about 600 miles. We were gone for 6 weeks. But that told me that I had a resilience I never knew I had. And I just hope, I like to give students the opportunity to find that themselves. They could probably find it if they went on an Outward Bound program, or if they went hiking here in the United States on the Appalachian Trail, or someplace where they were out of their normal element. But I think it's sort of like some people take a gap year. You need to take a time when you pull yourself out of where you live and enter what psychologists call a liminal state, a state where you're on the threshold. I'm neither in my old world nor in a new world. So that's what a lot of pilgrimage is. You go to as they call it in medieval Spanish, the threshold of the saint, which means you go to his tomb. But then you had to return home. So you go to a doorway, you see another world, but then you have to go home and reincorporate into who you were. But you're not the same. You're a different person. And it's a pretty quick change, quick decision to go and return. But what you find is that the effect and the changes are kind of life-lasting. And you continue changing based on that one short experience for many, many years.